Okay, in this video we're going to continue our discussion on introductory things to know about learning Gemara, and we're going to focus on micro. This video is going to be focused on how to do micro Gemara studies, okay? Now micro is composed of 6 primary steps, right? The first one is, and this one is very important, although it sounds very simple, is be able to pronounce everything correctly. Okay, having correct pronunciation and inflection in words contributes to having a clear thought process, which is crucial for understanding Gemara. So step 1, make sure you're actually reading the words properly. Okay, this will get much better with practice, as well as if you're very behind, I guess, on the reading in terms of just reading words without nukudos, then there are resources such as a Gemara Menukad. Gemara Menukad you can find. Menukad, which has the Gemara punctuated and things, but this is can be somewhat of a, quote, crutch at the beginning, and unless necessary, it's generally better to just jump right in without the nukudos, and you'll pick it up faster that way. Okay, so that's step 1. Step number 2 is to make sure to know the literal translation. Literal translation of everything. Okay, of every word. Okay, just know the literal translations of every word. How to translate every single word. You don't have to necessarily put together parts. For example, in English, let's say you had a sentence that was the rain fell heavily, or fell for many hours. Okay, so that's a sentence. So we know what rain is. We know what fell or fall means, right? Something going down, and rain is water that comes down. Okay, many means a lot, and hours, we know what hours means. So we know what all the pieces of these sentences means. You don't have to know. You don't have to necessarily know that we're talking about the rain that fell for many hours, and the predicate and the pronoun and the blah blah blah. You don't have to know all of that. Just know the literal translation of every word. Know that Amar means said. Okay, just know that. This is the stage where you're going to look up words that you don't know. Just make sure you know every single word, and then you'll be able to string them together. Okay, and this leads into the third step, which is make sure you can punctuate the Gemara properly. Punctuate the Gemara. Okay, so for example, and the reason this leads in is because if you know what all the words mean, then you'll be able to figure out, sort of like a puzzle, where commas should go. So if we have the Aramaic piece of Gemara that says Amar Rav Papa Kule Alma Tsarich or Tzrichim Lememar. Okay, so you don't have to know what these words mean, but if we would know, Amar means said, and we know that Rav Papa is a name. Okay, and then if we knew that this meant all, and we meant the world, the because of the aleph at the end, definite article. Okay, the world, and then Srichim is need. Lamemar is to say. Okay, say. So just looking at this, we would be able to say that Amar Rav Papa. So we know just from Rav Papa said. Okay, all the world need to say. Okay, and this is made up. I'm not quoting it from a Gemara per se. So just from this, we would know that Rav Papa is saying this. We could put a comma here, and if we were punctuating it like English, it would be like this. Okay, and maybe it would be a dot dot if it was going somewhere else. But we would already know how to read it properly just from being able to translate each individual word, even if the tenses weren't 100%. But just to figure it out, so that's step 3. You punctuate it after you have the literal translation of each piece. Okay, then we have step number 4. Step number 4 is the last step of the first part of micro, and this is you want the simple pshat. Simple pshat. Okay, simple pshat means, what is the Gemara actually saying? Okay, so in our example up here, what is the Gemara actually saying? Okay, what is the Gemara actually saying? So in our example, well, we know that Rav Papa is saying something. Now we're figuring out, we have our punctuation, we have our literal translation, so now we're just figuring out what's going on. So we know that Rav Papa is saying something, and this is what he's saying. The Gemara is saying that everybody, the whole world, needs to say something. That's all Rav Papa is saying. So with these 4 steps together, we can pronounce the words properly. Okay? We can translate each of the words. We can punctuate based on our translation, and we can figure out the semantical meaning of the actual piece of Gemara. Okay? Those 4 are crucial, absolutely necessary for going to shir. You can't even go into a Gemara shir after learning a Seder, preparing a Gemara, if you cannot prepare these 4 steps. That's how important they are. There's very little to talk about in an actual Ian shir in the yeshiva if you cannot produce these 4 steps. So focusing on these 4 steps and understanding the Gemara at this very basic but clear level, okay, and many people unfortunately don't understand it at this level and proceed to move on to, as we'll see, the later steps. These 4 steps are the goal. If you're having a lot of trouble preparing something, these 4 steps are what you should focus on, and make sure you get at least this before going into a shir. Okay, now we're going to move on to part 2. And part 2, okay, Part 2 we're going to put over here, and this is step number 5. Okay? Now, ask questions. Okay? Ask questions on the Gemara that you've learned. Okay? You're going to ask questions. Make diukim. Make diukim. Okay? These are inferences. Diukim. Okay? You want to try and see, well, the Gemara says something, and maybe that implies something about a deeper level. Okay? You want to try and see what you can learn from the plain text of the Gemara, because ask your own questions. And this step is, you don't expect to be amazing at this step, and especially at the very beginning. This is something you get better at. And then in the last stage, 6, you want to try and answer your questions. Try and answer them. Try and answer questions. Okay? Now, this is before you've moved on. Remember, this is all in one step of the Gemara. All 6 of these steps are in one step. Okay? You read the step. Make sure you can pronounce everything. Make sure you can translate everything. Punctuate the Gemara as best you can in a way that makes sense. Simple pshat. Figure out what the Gemara is actually saying. Then ask questions on what the Gemara said. Why did it say it like that? Why does it repeat itself in the Mishnah like this? Why does it seem to leave this out? Why is a case that it said it was going to mention not mentioned? Are different Amoraim consistent in things that they are saying, or is there a discrepancy? And if there is, why is there a discrepancy? Think questions like this. You'll begin to start, the more Gemaras you do, you'll start to think more and more and more like the Gemara. You'll begin to start to ask the Gemara's questions before the Gemara even asks them. Okay? Many times, though, in the early stages, you should be aiming to figure out what the Gemara is going to ask, and you'll be off the mark many times, especially at the beginning, but over time and with practice you'll be able to start to predict where the Gemara is going, and that's when your reading confidence will really spike, and you'll be much more confident at reading Gemara and at really tearing a sugya apart and understanding it. So you want to ask those questions, and then you want to try and answer them. Try and answer them if you can. See, you thought of the question. If it is the Gemara's question, how would you answer it before you see the Gemara's answer? Okay? And this is all mental exercise that helps you really understand the Gemara you're learning. So these are the 6 steps of micro and the breakdown. And remember, you want to get at least the first 4 before going to Shir. And 5 and 6 are already the next sort of layer of depth to the Gemara. Okay? So Hatzlacha Rabba, and all the best.